The West Virginia Mountaineers needed a win. They needed another big win to pad that resume for their hopes of advancing to the NCAA tournament, and they get it. West Virginia gets another win over a top 15 ranked team, or at least a team ranked in the top 15 at the time of the game. So pause Country Roads if you're singing that tune. And we now have a post-game show here on WVSN. So West Virginia Sports Now, Ethan Bock joining me live from the Coliseum, as he did have our coverage, his game recap, post-game coverage, comments from Bob Huggins and players all over there at WVSN. I'm Mike Asti, and the Mountaineers win it 76-71 over Iowa State. And this is one of a win against a team they hadn't yet seen in conference play. They will eventually have to travel and play the Cyclones on the road. But this win number 15, the Mountaineers needed this. They needed wins like this because they squandered them early on, and obviously in conference play, starting off 0-5. But this team has been playing well lately, despite that game against TCU. Obviously coming off of their most impressive performance in terms of wire to wire, not the opponent, against Oklahoma. And then this, another quality win. Stack it right with TCU, stack it right with Auburn, even going back to the destruction of Pitt, who now is certainly a tournament team way back and out of conference play and playing close with Purdue, who's eventually snagged a number 1 ranking in the country. So reason for optimism on this night, but we will see moving forward. So Ethan, West Virginia gets the win, and it was a game back and forth, pretty close. But two things jump out at me from watching this game and really even looking at the box score for anybody. That a couple things that Bob Huggins preaches, they didn't get done in this game, yet they won. It's kind of an important win because they were able to win an ugly game, a game that wasn't pretty, a game that Huggins probably would have been screaming and talking about how they didn't have leadership if they didn't win it, because they got themselves in foul trouble. Eric Stevenson went from the hero with one of his better games of his whole college career to fouling out of a game. They also lose the rebounding battle, which we've talked all year long that this team should rebound well, has been rebounding well, and needs to rebound well to win. They don't really rebound well in this game, yet they win, and they have to hang on at the end as well. So how did they do it?
Finding the will to win. I can't believe this team got out rebounded and they allowed 28 points in the paint and they still won.
Right.
I think also a big factor was, Iowa State had 3 guys foul out second half.
They
had
also
2 other guys with 4
trouble.
fauls.
True.
Yeah,
yes.
they had,
and
a
they
lot of
also
foul
turned
as
it
well.
over more than West Virginia, so that might balance that out as well. Yeah.
Yeah, Iowa State couldn't convert at the end of the game. They had 2 opportunities. One was a transition layup for Caleb Grill, missed it. And another one, Joe Toussaint drew a charge foul on Jaron Holmes. So, Iowa State had 2 opportunities at the end of the game, but West Virginia found the will to win, and they got 2 big defensive stops in a must-win situation.
Yeah, and West Virginia had the top 2 leading scorers from the game, both as Mountaineers, in Johnson and Emmett Matthews, who just went off. And maybe it's also kind of good that, we were arguing all season long with fans on whether it was Eric Stevenson or Emmett Matthews is the best player and the best leader, and then Huggins basically disqualified both of them during the losing streak and saying somebody got to step up again. It was Eric Stevenson against Oklahoma for sure, carrying him on his own basically. Could have won that game by himself, and he's played well recently, answering the bell. And then Emmett Matthews now has this big game, and this is a major staple win, again, a needed win. So maybe it's kind of good that they're both kind of back. They're both trading off big nights. They can rely on one of them to explode and carry the torch. Johnson also gets minutes in this game and really delivers. And again, they do it when Stevenson was cold early and then had foul trouble. So this wasn't a game he was able to really show what he can do like the other night. Is there any credence to the way they won this game being a benefit and being actually good for this team? A win's a win. You want to get a win, but to win this game with Stevenson not having his best day, not shooting well, having the foul issues, you mentioned the rebounding. They do win the turnover battle, but they still turned it over, I believe, 11 times, so they weren't clean. And Emmett Matthews having to carry them when that had been a while to happen. Johnson tallying minutes that some were calling for him to get more of in recent games, and he wasn't getting some in some of the losses. Maybe now he's finally told Bob, hey, I clearly deserve to get more minutes, as Bob admitted recently. Did the way this happened actually give more hope that they're going to keep getting this done? They're going to get in the NCAA tournament and they're going to get enough. Magic number might be 3 more wins, which we'll talk about in a moment. But they didn't just win it. They won it in a way that I don't think anyone would have expected them to win it, and might be a nice way they won it.
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway is that Kedrian Johnson and Matthews have both been banged up the last few weeks. And then they combined for 42 points. Like, it's huge that they were able to get a win with Eric Stevenson having an off night for the first time in a little bit.
Yeah.
Trey Mitchell had a disappointing second half, to be honest. And then the bench,
9 points, 3 for 10, but yeah.
Yeah, all of his points were in the first half. He played well in the first half.
Right.
And then the bench only scored 15 points. Like, that's good. Like, that's fine. But this bench has shown multiple times that they can score 20, 25 points.
100%.
So just for both Kedrian and Emmett to score over 20 points and basically put this team on their back tonight and get a really big resume win for this team goes a long way. Definitely changes my perception a little bit on this team for sure.
Yeah, and we'll get your takeaways here in the coming days again on WV Sports Now. So it is our WV Sports Now postgame show. Ethan Bock, Mike Asti. The Mountaineers win it 76-71, their 15th win of the year, and they get another one in conference play, which is a really big deal. But I think one thing we didn't mention yet that is also really important and has been a problem in the losses, it's free throws. I mean, they're 83% on the night here, 26 for 31. Yeah, you want them to be perfect. It's called a free throw and a charity stripe, but they were close to it in this one of their better free throw performances of the season. They really were struggling to hit those free throws in the losses. So add that on as well. They did do that, even though they didn't rebound. They turned it over and they got in foul trouble. They did hit free throws, which may be frustratingly for some fans, Ethan, and we talked about this earlier in the season, that if they just simply would have been better at the free throw line, and that's it, even with the mental collapses, they would have probably at least won 2 more games, probably would have beat Kansas State, who's become a really good team, at least would have beat Oklahoma State, and then they probably secured. That's it. There's no reason to debate it any longer about the NCAA tournament, regardless of the rest of the season. They lost those games, but at least now they've cleaned up the free throw line issue, I guess.
Yeah, during that 5-game losing streak, this team struggled to make free throws.
Right.
And then in the last 7 games, Mountaineers are 5-2. Oddly enough, it's a coincidence. They're winning games and they're hitting high 70s, low 80s from the free throw line. So it's almost like free throws win the game for them.
Yeah, they're important.
It's crazy.
Yeah, they count. There's something. Yeah.
But this team. I mean, as long as this team can hit free throws, they can compete with anybody. They competed with these teams in the Big 12 with shooting 50%, 60% from the line.
Yeah, they were in those games even when they weren't hitting free throws. They wasn't like they were losing by 30 points outside of the Kansas blowout. And then you also have a situation where people were saying, well, maybe they can't hit free throws against good teams because they get out of it mentally. Like, all of that clearly not the case and gone. You can hit a free throw. They can hit a free throw. They're showing they can hit a free throw. And now, they're able to win some more games. Close games down to the wire against good teams in conference play. That's what they need to do. That's what they should have been doing. That's what they now are doing. And I guess if they're going to hit a stride, this is when to hit it. So I do want to flip the conversation because now we can really start talking about this as we're into February and it's all about the resume. It's going to be about conference tournament play still for the Mountaineers, but I think, hopes of winning the whole Big 12 tournament. It is the best tournament in conference in the country. That's probably not happening, but they are getting themselves in a situation where it might not matter in terms of the NCAA field. So they have been able to advance themselves off computer rankings despite losing because the conference is so tough. They get a win here, but Iowa State has been struggling, to be fair, even though they're a top 15 team. They lost 2 out of their prior 3. They actually did beat Kansas, but lost to a couple teams that are middle of the road, like losses by West Virginia. So you just never know in this freaking Big 12. And as we've also talked about, that even though West Virginia has 3 top 15 wins now, 2 of them in conference play and 1 to Auburn, they actually were favored in 2 of those 3 going into the game. So there's a possibility that people could actually argue factually so that they weren't upsets, even though the Mountaineers were not ranked and they were. It's a weird season we're dealing with right now, and Pitt's not ranked despite leading the ACC and one of the bigger wins of the season for West Virginia. So it is very, very bizarre how the rankings, computers, and projections are handling themselves. But based on what you saw, what you're seeing now, the vibe around this team, and knowing that Lenardi put them as a 10 seed prior to the game, he had them from the first 4 out to the first 4 in, 10 seed. They get this win despite what's happened to Iowa State recently. Where are you in terms of confidence level that this team is getting in the NCAA tournament, and then we'll worry about what they do in March once they get there?
Yeah, once Lenardi took them off the bubble this afternoon, I said if they beat Iowa State tonight, they're going to start playing for seed lines. As long as they take care of business, of course.
Right.
You have to beat Texas Tech and Oklahoma State at home. Those aren't technically bad losses, but those are games you have to win. You're better than both of those teams. And this team needs to get to 18 wins. I've said it for the last 2 weeks. This team has to get to 18 wins to get into the field.
Yeah.
I think there's like a small chance they can get in with 17, but that's when you're going to start asking for a lot of help from the other conferences and
maybe
teams.
maybe a tournament run at that point.
Yeah. This team needs to take care of business at home still. Winning a game in the Big 12 tournament wouldn't hurt either. But this, I mean, after winning tonight, they're at 15-9 in the Big 12. Like, they're on pace to make the tournament.
Yeah.
Like, everybody knows how tough this conference is. That's why Lenardi has 8 out of the 10 teams in his tournament field right now. That's why West Virginia is top 15 in net, despite having 9 losses already. It's just
right.
It's just the way they're playing. At the computers and off of the eye test as well, you can tell that this team's competitive. So 3 more, I really do. I really do think 3 more gets them in, no matter how they do it. I mean, they got 7 more regular season games to go, 8 more guaranteed games. So as long as they win 3 out of those 8 games, I think they're in.
Yeah, and they should. But they also should have won some games they lost at the beginning of Big 12 play. You could argue absolutely, though, this is a different team the way they're playing now. You also could certainly argue that this season it's been a weird one, Ethan. You've covered the team for a few years. I've been covering the team for longer. That earlier in out of conference play, they were looking really, really good. They're quieting some doubters. The schedule was tougher this year in out of conference play than even a year ago. They're proving people wrong, and Huggins finally adapted to the transfer portal and look at these transfers. They get into conference play, and it just looks like, we're idiots and the wheels fell off and they're not even good at all, and they're lucky to even make an NIT. They do then dismiss Larry Harrison, who had been with Huggins for almost 3 decades and certainly been at WVU for almost 2, all the success he had as an assistant. That feels weird. That feels murky. It feels like maybe him and Huggins had a rift. Huggins says it wasn't him, but it just felt odd. They do bring in Dermar Johnson, who ends up being a home run hire and great for recruiting. We're already seeing that in the works. And again, you can find Ethan's coverage on that at WV Sports Now and what they're already doing for the future, especially in the DC area. And then from there, you get this team now. They won 4 out of 6 coming into this game. So they're able to turn it around and play a lot better. And the TCU loss didn't look good, but sweeping TCU with a really, really good coach and Jamie Dixon, and that being a good team that was ranked in the top 15 was probably unlikely. They beat him once, they lose to him the other. Okay. Other than that, they played relatively well and cleaned up most of the issues, and they do get this win despite problems. So it's almost like you got to evaluate this season in 3 or 4 chunks, and they're almost like 3 or 4 different seasons that are just a totally different vibe that make no sense. And if all of a sudden next week they would turn around and have a 5th series, and that would make no sense to what happened here and lose to Texas Tech, I don't necessarily know anyone would be totally blindsided and shocked, because that's the way the season has been. It's been a roller coaster ride, literally. But yeah, if they take care of that business, they should definitely get in. You talk about seed line. Problem for the Mountaineers coming up are the harder games. So can they afford to lose to Texas, lose to Baylor? These are ranked teams. These are on the road. It's a Texas swing, and it won't be easy, which is why they needed this one, and they do get it. But can they afford those losses, and even having those losses be bad ones, and just lose those games? as long as they win the rest and get themselves in not only the tournament, but a decent situation? Or do they need to clip off those? Does it matter what they do in those? Because we're talking about total wins. I agree, 18. They have winnable games before the end of the season and could even win a conference tournament game. But the games coming up that are going to get in your mind, if you're a fan or even if you're a projector, could be losses. Very reasonably.
Yeah.
Like, do they matter? Are they a big deal now? Or because they got this third top 15 win, can they sit comfortably and say, we want to gauge ourselves. We're playing for seed line. We don't want to be a 12 seed. We want to try to get in that top 10 field, maybe even get all the way to a 6 if we get those wins. But if we lose those games, the sky is not falling like it would have been.
Yeah, that's why tonight was important to get a win. That's why winning against Oklahoma last Saturday was also important. It's just those final 4 road games between Texas, Baylor, Kansas, Iowa State. It's brutal.
Right.
I don't want to say I don't want to say that they should just be comfortable losing back-to-back games right now.
Right.
But at the same time, and because that would put them at 15 and 11, that would move them back into the bubble.
That's what I'm kind of asking. Like, would it move them into the bubble? But those are good teams. They're two top 15 teams. You're going to put them in a bubble.
But eventually, like, it'll be 11 wins. It'll be 10 wins, 11 wins. It's like last year. You can't keep saying quality loss or
I know
in this conference. So I don't want to say they should be comfortable losing back-to-back games. It wouldn't be the end of the world. I know West Virginia fans may overreact a little bit if they lose back-to-back.
Oh, you think? Oh, yeah. Man, you're getting to know the West Virginia fan.
Yeah, I know they may overreact, and I hope they don't, because it wouldn't be the end of the world. It would just put them back into the bubble, which is why
they could then play out of. I guess. Is that kind of what you're saying, that they very likely could be in the bubble and then play out of it as long as they win those other games? Because we are talking about ranked teams here.
Yeah, good teams. It's almost like saying it's like, get back to me after Texas Tech and Oklahoma State at home, because if they win both of those games, then it offsets the road losses to Texas and Baylor, if that would happen. But if they drop one of those games and then they still lose to Texas and Baylor, like, then we're talking. They might not. It's going to be a nail biter on Selection Sunday.
Sure, I mean, it does put pressure. Yeah,
it would help them if they went 1-1. That would be a great road trip. You're talking, they would actually probably move up a seed line from where they are. But yeah, I mean, it's maybe not the end of the world. Yeah, maybe 2. It's not the end of the world if they lose both games, but they got to take care of business the week after against Texas Tech and Oklahoma State.
And as you said, that's why the win over Oklahoma, the way they won it too, to really show the people that are important that, hey, we lost by 1 point before. We weren't really mentally in it. We shouldn't have lost that game, but we did. But we're better than Oklahoma. Like, if you look at 2 games, you're dominating, winning by 30, then you lose by 1. There's nobody in the world, including a Sooners fan, that's going to say West Virginia is not a better team. If they played 10 times, the Mountaineers probably win 7 of the games. And the wins are probably by significant margins. That is what they prove now. So it at least shows the committee they're probably still not, certainly one of the top teams of the conference, but they're at least middle of the pack. They're at least a tournament caliber team. They're at least a team that can beat some teams, and they're not going to embarrass you if you do put them in. That proved that, and then this solidifies that, and that's why these games were so important with what's coming up. But it's just another day that ends in Y in the Big 12. That's why you can't get so high, because this was a really big deal, a much-needed win, but you just look at the schedule and say, man, top 15, they actually have, I think it's 5 or 6 more games against ranked teams the rest of the year. Not many teams in the country got that. That's just wild.
Mm-hmm.
It's just wild the rest of the year. And yeah, Texas Tech and Oklahoma State are must-win games, because let's just face it, even with how well this team is playing, and even if they do clean up the rebounding and foul trouble, they're going to lose some of those. Like, if they beat Baylor or Texas, I think we would agree one of the wins, splitting those, or even if they lose both, win the next 2, but then somehow beat Kansas or something like that, or then Iowa State again, but on the road, so it'll count more. That guarantees them getting in the NCAA tournament, but probably still a 10 or 11 seed, depending on what else they do. If they do clip off both, they could really move up. So I do kind of want to ask that now, because they have another staple win. I've seen 10 seed, first 4 out, first 4 in, all that type of area. Some even projected 10 seed versus Duke, which would be interesting. This is not your Coach K, older brother's father's Duke team. But where for you is realistic to expect the Mountaineers to be seed-wise on projections that fans are going to see leading up now to the weekend after this game, because these clip off daily, and then just even kind of what you think will happen the rest of the season in terms of seed line? Because I got some fans saying that, wow, they could get a 6 seed now based on this win, but that seems like a really big leap from where we're seeing them placed in at 10. They drop some games they shouldn't lose. They have really big wins, though, but they're clearly middle of the pack of a conference, even if it's the best in the country. So there's only so much help Lenardi and company can give them. Like, where are you expecting seed-wise? Where would you place them seed-wise? How do you think that's going to shake out?
Yeah, I think people don't realize how close the window is between if they got 17 wins and if they got 19 or 20. Like 17 wins is you could either miss a tournament or go to Dayton. 19 wins or 20 wins, I truly think can get you to that 7 seed, 6 seed if you got help. I really do think that. They're going to have to beat some good teams. They're going to be quad 1 wins. So 19 wins as a 7 seed doesn't sound that outlandish. I think after tonight, projections will probably move them up to a 9 seed. That's a quad 1 win at home. Iowa State was just in first place in the Big 12 just last week.
Just beat Kansas.
Just
beat Kansas. That's what somebody actually said here in the chat, that how can you guys say that Kansas is basically a game they can't win when the team they beat just beat Kansas? And that's fair. I got to give it to you. Granted, West Virginia got blown out by Kansas, but
they didn't just beat them. They controlled the whole game too. They beat,
right. It just makes no sense. This conference makes no sense, because West Virginia got manhandled by the Sam Kansas team not that long ago, and then West Virginia beats Iowa State, and Iowa State had been struggling prior to the Kansas win, which showed that they're really for real, and then they go ahead and lose this game.
I think overall, though, just looking at the future, if this team can get 18 wins, I think they can get a 10 seed. It depends on who they beat, obviously. If they beat Texas
what's
Tech,
the ceiling hope then? Is there hope better for, because you also could get really deep into it and argue, Ethan, you know this, you could argue that while a 10 seed is clearly where the committee is saying that you're not as good as, say, a 9 seed or an 8 seed, they're trying to bump teams and say they're better by seeding. Obviously, the lower number means that they think you had a better year and are deserving of more. But in the history of the NCAA tournament, will tell you that based on the roadmap and the path and where the games are and the matchups and how things usually shake out, you're usually preferring to either be a 10 or a 7. If you can't get to a 7, you'd rather be a 10 than a 9 or an 8, if that makes any freaking sense. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, maybe they're actually better off sliding into this 10 than jumping to the 9 or 8 that a win over Kansas, Baylor, or Texas would give them, as long as they take care of other business, because it is kind of about that. It's just weird how the tournament sometimes works.
Yeah, I think this team's ceiling's a 6 seed. I really do. If they can get up to 19, 20 wins, which I never thought I'd say that a couple weeks ago,
right?
But there's an opportunity. There's a window for that to happen. I really don't see this team. I don't see this team imploding. I don't see it. I don't think they miss the tournament. And if they do, it's like it comes down to the last day on Selection Sunday, and they're waiting for that final spot. I could see them being first 4 out. That's their floor to me. But yeah, I agree. I totally agree that West Virginia should shoot for a 7 or 10 seed, because that's more favorable. It's
you
how
can't
it works.
do it. You want to try to win the games, but you know what I mean?
It's how, if West Virginia got a 7 or 10 seed, I feel bad for whoever the 2 seed is. I really do.
Right.
Because TCU, Iowa State, Auburn, those are all teams that can compete for a 2 seed down the stretch. So West Virginia beat all 3 of them. So
yeah,
I would feel bad for that 2 seed.
Yeah. And again, whereas if you're an 8 or 9, you're obviously in that 8-9 matchup, and it's, you're feeling you're placing a team that's maybe a little bit more even to you. Granted, they're saying that the other one is way better than you, but West Virginia, based on the matchups of who they probably will see, has already really performed well against those teams, and it's just usually an upset spot. A 10 seed advancing and winning, it's not as shocking if that would be the case. So it is interesting how the tournament usually does, the mental gymnastics usually work and usually does shake out. Ethan Bock again from the Coliseum. We'll get him home soon here. It is our WVU postgame show. The Mountaineers do get the win, 76-71 over Iowa State. Another top 15 win. Can't believe I'm saying that. Another top 15 win for how down everybody was in this program was just a month ago. I mean, honestly, I feel like the firing of Larry Harrison feels like it was 6 years ago, but it wasn't that long ago. And that's how different the vibe is now, just on recruiting. And it's nothing against Larry, because fans are going to go in that direction. He obviously was there for tons of success. He was there when they almost beat Purdue earlier in the season. He was there when you were in Portland and they were playing really, really well. He was there at the start of conference play when Huggins and everyone thought they were going to actually have a chance to be at top of the conference. So it's not like Larry was this cancer there. There's no proof of that. And he didn't mess up anything with Perez in terms of factual proof of that either. But regardless, that we talked about it then. That could have maybe given the team a kick in the pants they weren't expecting, because they all didn't want that to happen. Once it did, they all fell in love with Dermar Johnson, who is a perfect hire despite maybe lack of coaching experience. He fits right in as a guy who can show them how to get it done. He can show them how to get in the NBA. He can show them how to actually hit the shots and play the sets and play defense, still doing it physically, not as old as Larry. He's only 20 years older rather than 40 plus years older. And he also can help them in future years recruiting. He's likely going to be there a very, very long time. So maybe it'll help Huggins want to stick around too. And it just feels different for you watching, following, covering this team every day for us. Is there something you can point to that turned the corner for this to be a better chapter that is going to at least get this team in the NCAA tournament and could get them a quality seed line, when, as you mentioned, not even a month ago, it was a conversation on NIT at best, and how are even fans going to react to that, because no one's going to care. And people were out for Huggins despite getting inducted in the Basketball Hall of Fame, and maybe he would actually choose to retire. And it just was funky and bad and no fun. But now, soon after, they could have a chance, an outside chance at 20 wins. They're at least going to probably get in the field. They got another top 15 win. They're stacking quality wins. They've been winning most of the games. They're cleaning up some problems. They got great recruiting coming in. The future is looking brighter. What happened to turn that corner? Or did they just finally get to the potential they should have always been? And even if this team gets in the NCAA tournament and somehow makes that dark horse Sweet 16 run, we might still say in the back of our mind, this team actually might have been good enough to get a top 4 seed if they would have cleaned up and done what they should have done at the beginning of conference play. Like, is there still maybe a what if story, because they actually are showing how good they should be?
Yeah, I think people don't realize how much Coach DeMar Johnson's already making an impact on this program. I think people just kind of think he's just sitting there, like as a supporter for this season.
Yeah.
But I mean, he's scouting games and he's recruiting already. Going to watch Cooper Flag with Hugs. I mean, he's having a huge impact, and he's only in his third week. Yeah, no, like nothing against Coach Harrison. Like we said, Coach Harrison did a lot for this program here for 16 years. But I think just having a different face on the sidelines, a younger face as well, to pair with Alex Ruoff, grad assistant, I think it's done a lot for this team. Just to kind of get a different perspective on how to play under Huggins.
Yeah.
A lot of these guys haven't played under Huggins before. This first year for Eric Stevenson, Trey Mitchell, Jimmy Bell.
Yeah.
And go on. I could say 7, 8 names.
And as much as they all said at the beginning of the year they wanted to play for Hugs because he's a Hall of Famer, it's easier said than done once you get into it.
Yeah. I just think, especially that the win over TCU, and then I know they lost the next game against Texas, but winning at Texas Tech and Lubbock, getting that monkey off their back of not winning a conference road game in almost 2 years. They just got a lot. They just had a lot of monkeys get off their backs. They just got they got that top 15 win against TCU, a healthy TCU team.
Yeah.
And they dominated that game in the first half. And then with Texas Tech, the biggest thing for me in the last 3 weeks, with the coincidence of Dermar getting on staff, is just seeing the development of Seth Wilson, James Okongwu. And like those guys come on the floor now, and they have immediate impact. Seth Wilson hits threes. James Okongwu looks like one of the best bigs they've had in years.
They weren't an out-of-conference play at all, no. Yeah.
No. And now you have James Okongwu getting 9 rebounds, 10 rebounds a game, 3 blocks. I mean, his energy level is incredible. He looked lost at the beginning of the season this year, non-conference play, but just seeing his maturity and seeing him develop and grow,
right.
I mean, his potential is crazy. He's only 19. He's a sophomore. He's still got 3 years left. So I am excited for the future of this team.
And you can confidently credit Dermar with a lot of that, because obviously fans that, whether they're casual or avid fans that are following the program with a passion every day, and there's a lot of Mountaineer fans that are like that for sure. When we're talking an assistant coach who's not doing press conferences every week, if you're not at practice, it's not as visible or as clear to be able to grade him. Maybe people that don't study recruiting as much as you do, but you can confidently credit Dermar in only really 3 weeks of actually having an office of really impacting this team. In terms of what you said, it can go to him in your eyes, a lot of it at least.
Oh yeah, I mean this staff the last 6 months of they've went after 4 or 5 stars in the class of 2024, 2025.
Yeah.
But just kind of getting Dermar and Coach Huggins has seen Cooper Flag a couple times in person.
Yeah.
But just getting a guy like Dermar talking with EJ Walker when he visits against Texas. I mean, he talked to Coach Johnson for 40 minutes before the game. So I think just that impact and Dermar is able to relate how to play under Hugs and then go on and have a successful pro career. So I mean, he's big for this coaching staff on the recruiting scene for sure.
Yeah, and it's really about the recruiting scene, and it's about the recruiting scene, especially in that DC DMV area there, just because he was a folk hero there, really. And again, it's somebody that these kids can go to YouTube, can fire up a Google search and say, he did it. He got to the league number 6 overall selection in the 2000 NBA draft. I believe that's correct off the top of my head. That's crazy. I know he didn't end up having a perennial all-star, Hall of Fame, great career that happened for many others around that chunk of the early 2000s, but there's also a lot of others that you don't hear about that flamed out, that went nowhere. He continued to be able to make money playing basketball, which is what most of these guys' hopes are going to be. So he's able to kind of mentor and say, hey, this is how you play under Hugs. This is how you have success. This is how you make money. This is how you get to the NBA possibly. If you don't make it there, this is where you can go. This is how you get there. And maybe, again, you can learn some of my mistakes that help me not end up becoming what maybe I should have been in the NBA. So, and he can relate to them. They can maybe see some highlights of him again. And if not, they can joke around and play one-on-one, and he can still actually, shoot and throw some moves on him. So I think having a younger staff is a really big deal. And yeah, Ruoff can be added in there. Others can be added in there. The entire staff, all of a sudden, after firing Larry Harrison, became one of the younger staffs in the conference, with the exception of Huggins. But that's great. When you have a coach who's pushing 70, you got a younger staff that's really revitalizing things, and they all know how to deal with Huggins. And there's still even mentorship, and obviously he's not coaching there. He's not going to coach there. I don't want to get into this. But Joe Mazzulla, who's obviously getting it done and having success with the Celtics and going to coach the All-Star game with the best record in the league, he's talking to Huggins. They're talking. Who knows if he's talked to the team or if there's been talks with him and Dermar. I'm sure he's willing to help, even if he's not officially coaching West Virginia. So there's a lot in the pipeline that's there now that will help recruiting, that can help this team, that I don't know if was being ignited as much before. And maybe, as some chatters are saying now, that it might have just been some of these seniors realize, hey, this is it. Eric Stevenson run out of games. This is it. He's a 5th year. Like, this is it. And the fact that they all needed a kick in the pants, maybe even Huggins himself, because he admitted some faults of his of not giving enough minutes to Johnson. We see when he gives him minutes, top 2 leading scorer on the team against a top 15 team. So things can happen, and who knows where this team will be. It should be in the NCAA tournament, you would figure, which is where they really always should have been. And then you never know once you get there, for sure. Going to the Texas game, going to these games coming up here just quickly as we do round out the show, what does this team need to do matchup-wise? Because these could be solidifying wins. You get one of them, you get this win over Texas. We might not have to have this conversation any longer about if they're going to get in the field. It's really where they're going to be. You do have winnable games after that, but you can't just drop games, as you were saying earlier. And these are going to be really, really tough. But just in your estimation of following college basketball overall, because some fans could also argue the West Virginia has beaten 3 top 15 ranked teams win the game or play, but then those teams quickly fall out of the top 15. And Iowa State did lose 2 out of 3 prior to the game, despite the win over Kansas. So are these teams maybe overrated and West Virginia is taking advantage of that, or are the Mountaineers just really good? What will we see from these upcoming games and be able to evaluate that? How good are Texas and Baylor in particular. And what does West Virginia need to do to try to get one of those wins?
Yeah, both Texas and Baylor have some of the best backcourts in the country. Texas has Tyrese Hunter and Marcus Carr. Baylor's got Keontae George, LJ Cryer, Adam Flagler. West Virginia's going to have their hands full on this Texas road trip for sure. If both teams are driving into the paint and getting anything they want, I don't know how West Virginia is going to win the game. They can't allow 30, 40 points in the game, or points in the paint. Sorry, but that's the biggest concern for me is just the guard play on both Texas and Baylor. Texas plays small. Baylor's got Jalen at the 4, so they kind of play small. But then now they have Jonathan Tamuachachua back, so now they have a defensive force in the paint. So West Virginia's gonna have to they're gonna have to find a way. They're gonna actually have to play defense and guard the paint. I think their defense has been fine the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, they've been better defensively for sure. That's what a lot of fans are saying. That the part of what I guess fans are saying that we're not bringing up enough is that this team has turned the corner and really showed how good they can be defensively. That them playing better defensively is also what helped lead to this win streak in a way. Yeah,
they still can fix defending the paint. I think that's
James
Okongo can defend the paint. But I just think as a unit, as a team, sometimes when Jimmy Bell's on the floor, sometimes he's getting stretched out to the perimeter, and that leaves the paint wide open. So this team has to guard the paint against Texas and Baylor, or else both teams are going to have a field day against West Virginia.
Yeah, and despite another top 15 win, it is at home. And yeah, there's still a quality win over an NCAA tournament team that's now having a chance to, can't even believe this is being said, but having a chance to win the ACC, even though the ACC is down in Pitt, and that was a big, big win. It's a totally different Pitt team now, but it's still on your resume. So they do have that one real quality road win, even though it's not far from Morgantown. They likely really, to get a quality seed and solidify and end that debate on the best win, getting one of those road wins, certainly against a ranked team, would really do that. That would be where everyone would agree would be the best win. It's a conference win. It would be on the road. They're all top 15 ranked teams. Pitt was not ranked. They still aren't ranked. So that would be a big deal because these top 15 wins are at home. I don't think they're going to get really penalized for that because it's the freaking Big 12 and these teams are really good, but they are at home. Getting one of those on the road that didn't happen, in November, I think is good. A post-Christmas, post-New Year's quality road win, I think would be good. And as you mentioned, it's not common for Huggins recent years, and COVID, other things are part of that, to do it on the road. So we'll see. It will not be easy though, but you hate to put must win on every game and say that they can squander this win if they don't get those, but they're really, really hard games coming up, but you don't just want to keep dropping games. So you still got to keep tabs, but this does allow you to breathe a little sigh of relief here as Mountaineers do get the win over Iowa State, a game that certainly could have went the other way. And I honestly think too, the way this team was playing and where they were even mentally after the Jose Perez decision, etc., a month, 2 months ago, this feels like a game they would have lost then, where Iowa State gets back in it. They get a lead. WVU's in foul trouble. Their leader fouls out. Huggins is getting upset. He's feeling like he's giving a vibe that he knows they're going to lose and he's going to start complaining in a press conference. And they're being carried by a couple players. They're not as deep, and yet they end up with the win nonetheless and hang on. And don't just win it by one. They end up with a 5-point win. So that, I think, is a nice feather in West Virginia's cap. That'll do it for this edition of our WVU post-game show. The Mountaineers do get to win another quality win to pad their NCAA tournament hopes and their resume, a much-needed win, but it does not get any easier coming up at all. Thanks to Ethan Bock there at the Coliseum with the coverage. Find his coverage and all of our coverage at WV Sports Now. Again, the Mountaineers win it 76-71, another top 15 win. Can they get a big one on the road, though? That'll now be the question for WVU, and where will they fall seed line-wise? Because I do now think they're in the field, and what will those computer rankings say? Because if they've been kind on losses, this another big win. So wait and see for that as well.